We've all had that overly critical boss that makes life so difficult for us. Today, I'd like to talk about how to work with an overly critical boss and five keys to staying sane and making that relationship prosper. Working for a critical boss can feel like you're operating under a microscope. Every task, no matter how small, seems to invite scrutiny and pain. Your boss points out what's going wrong more often than what's going right. They nitpick your work, highlighting every possibility for improvement, where they could have done it better, where it was done better in the past, et cetera, et cetera. And I know that meetings can sometimes feel like inquisitions, and you spend your days hearing more about what's wrong than what's right. And while some difficult managers can be challenging due to their mood swings, there's a lack of clarity, there's an unpredictability, and highly critical leaders create an atmosphere of consistent, pervasive negativity that's unhealthy in the workplace, obviously. And this can cause you to walk on eggshells, possess a fear of making mistakes, and leave you second guessing your decisions and interactions. So, for the deep thinking and the feeling and the caring CFO in this standpoint, or the professional who invests really a lot of emotional energy into their work, working for this type of leader just can be draining. I've done it, you've probably done it, I'm sure we all have. The key here is many of us internalize their managers or our managers' negative feedback as a sign that we are inept or we're incapable. And this could not be further from the truth. Often the critical nature, and we see this a lot in relationships outside of the business place, but somebody's critical nature has more to do with their own insecurities, their bad experiences, things that have made them overly cautious, a need to maintain control. It has everything to do with those experiences that they've had versus our actual performance. And while understanding this is helpful, continuously trying to diagnose the motivations behind a manager's criticisms is never ending and it's ultimately unproductive. So um, instead, it's more beneficial to focus on how we can navigate through these treacherous waters and work with this type of person in a way that makes your life less stressful. Managing upward is what I call it. Managing upward to a highly critical boss does not mean abandoning your own judgment or foregoing your responsibilities, for example, as a CFO, or simply following orders. It does not mean that. Rather, it's about proactively taking control of your interactions and steps to reduce the emotional baggage and the emotional toll that their behavior has on you. So there's five things that I want to walk through pretty quickly here on how to work with this overly negative boss in this case. Number one is view their feedback as engagement. So what that means is feedback means your boss is paying attention to your work. They're not disinterested in your projects and performance, even if they have a really bad, frustrating way to show it. And when you see your manager's criticism as a sign that they're invested in your work, it becomes easier to extract the valuable insights that they're trying to communicate from their comments. Their delivery might be for crap. It might not be ideal, but they care enough about the development and what's going on in your firm to provide that feedback, even though it may be negative, or yelling or emotional or whatever that is. If your boss didn't care, they might not even bother taking the time to correct your product in their mindset. And I always return to my high school and college days in the late 80s. Yeah, I'm that old. In the late 80s, when we were told it was good that the coach was yelling at you, because that meant you had potential and that the coach cared. Once the yelling stopped, it was time to get nervous about being ostracized to the sidelines. So, again, taking that feedback as an engagement is the first step. The second step is really to strip the emotions out and to embrace this shift in perspective. Try separating the tone from the content, the message from the delivery, so to speak. So do your best to mentally strip away the emotional charge from your manager's words. For example, if imagine that you've done a cash flow report and it goes to the CFO, and the CEO, excuse me, goes to the CEO, and the CEO comes back and says, "This is totally unacceptable." Well, that feedback in your mind should be, it's not totally unacceptable because it really isn't. We're professionals. We do a great job. that feedback should be there are issues that we need to address. So your interpretation or your filter, put that filter on and change that to really dissect the actual message and strip the emotion out of it. This helps you concentrate on the substance rather than the brackets unhelpful style or whatever style that the CEO or the manager is placing on you. Number three is get ahead of the negativity. Before your boss has a chance to correct you, proactively seek their input. And for example, if you are working on the cash flow report, you might say, I'm planning on approaching this project this way. Do you have any initial thoughts before I really dive in, spend a lot of time to make sure I'm on the right path? Um, Use clarifying lines such as, just to make sure I'm heading in the right direction. What I hear you saying is blank about this report, this analysis, this M&A, whatever this is. And rather than toiling for days or weeks or hours or whatever it is to craft the right deliverable, create a first draft and say, here's what I put together so far. And even if that's an outline, it may take 15 minutes, or a rough draft that took you hours. Let them know it's a bit rough around the edges, but that you want to capture their ideas and structure so that we can shape it into something outstanding. And I think your boss will be happy to have the control still. Be very happy, obviously, to provide feedback. And again, that's where we go into stripping the emotions out of that feedback and conserve your energy. Number four is kind of a role reversal. Put them on the spot and look for the good. Unfortunately, some people just have a pessimistic mindset, and if you're watching this, your boss is probably one of them. So you may need to nudge them to see possibilities and probe for what is working, because it's not their default to volunteer that out to you. And so when you're on the receiving end of criticism, try, I really enjoy hearing how much I can improve. It's also important to know what I'm doing well. So if you can, kick that back to me as well, or is there room for you to share the perspective on that? I'd really appreciate it. I understand you're concerned about the cash flow analysis. I'll work on that, but I'd also like your feedback on X that seemed to go pretty well. Ask for specific examples and clarification. And that's really the key here, is to guide, so to speak, that conversation to say, if you get that feedback that, well, this cash flow report is unacceptable, try a suggestion and say, yes, and when I'm working through this, what is your perspective? What are you looking for? And constantly go back to the yes. Don't get into the buts. As we all know, we still do it, even though we know we're not supposed to do it. But the yes and start to reply is key there. And the last real quick item under this is reward good behavior. And so when your boss gives you feedback that's constructive and even slightly less critical than in the past, even if it's 1%, acknowledge it. A simple, hey, thanks for sharing. That makes me feel so much motivated and have clarity on what we're going, or where we're going with this project. You will reinforce the behavior that you want to see more of. And honestly, it's like raising kids. If the room's clean, if the dishwasher is emptied, you give that positive feedback, and they take that. Even though they may not consciously take that, they may take it subconsciously and say, hey, this was good, it makes me feel good, I'll repeat that action forward. So in summary, remember that not all feedback is equally valuable or actionable. You can't, and you shouldn't, take every action on every criticism. Develop a mental filter to determine what's urgent, what's important, and what's relevant from a business standpoint to respond to. And also don't go down the yes man, yes woman role for your manager. I mean, that's sickening. Always keep your professional and personal integrity intact. That's not why we're here. We are the adult in the room. We're the numbers people typically. So we're the one usually pulling the reins back anyway. So keep that in mind. Even larger so, despite your best efforts, your boss may never change their behavior. Realize that. And just realize that ultimately, with all of your work and your emotional tracking in these 5 steps and whatever else you're doing to manage this relationship, you may need to consider making bigger changes to protect your mental and emotional well-being, and to seek out a work environment that's where you are truly valued. Now, go through these steps, go through the coaching. This process can take months, and it's worth it because we are invested in the firm and the firm has invested in us. The biggest key here is really, how do you keep your emotions at a positive level and not base these emotions off your boss's answer? So find ways to keep your positivity without relying on the outcome of your meeting or interaction with this person.